Great civilizations beget great myths, reflecting a people's understanding of the world, the order of life, and death. However, while most mythological systems feature deities akin to humans, in China, they appear entirely different. Here, the universe is organized as a vast empire where even immortals must abide by the laws. At its head stands the Jade Emperor, acting not so much as an all-powerful creator, but as an administrator of the cosmos. Under his command functions a divine bureaucracy, ministers responsible for the elements, judges tracking the karma of mortals, and countless officials who record the deeds of men and determine their posthumous fate. Everything in this world is based on laws, rituals, and order. Even after death, a person does not simply vanish, but passes through the 10 courts of hell, where their life is meticulously analyzed in scrolls, a verdict is delivered, and only then are they directed to a new reincarnation. Everything is organized clearly, systematically, and in accordance with rules. However, where there are rules, there will invariably be someone who breaks them. In the heavenly palace, an unexpected guest once appeared, a monkey born from stone. He was different. Instead of being content with a mortal's lot, he craved more. He mastered magical arts, mastered combat techniques, stole peaches of immortality from the heavens, and declared that from now on he was equal to the emperor himself. Armies were sent against him, sages were summoned, attempts were made to subdue him by force, but no one could defeat him. In other myths, heroes do not fight the gods, but change the very nature of the world. When a terrible flood struck China, people cried out for help, but the Celestials did not intervene. Then one man, Yu the Great, decided to act. He did not try to stop the elements. He did not rush into battle with the water. He changed the rivers themselves, dug canals, directed the flows in the necessary direction. The flood receded, and people could continue to live. Not war, but reason, knowledge, and labor became salvation. Such stories are alive to this day. Their reflection can be seen in Chinese architecture, festivals, and martial arts. Even the very structure of the state, where order and discipline are valued above all else, resembles the celestial empire, where everything is subject to law. But before telling about gods, heroes, battles, and myths, it is necessary to understand this world. Because once there was neither heaven nor earth, nor the emperor himself. There was only emptiness, a formless chaos. When time itself had not yet begun, chaos reigned in the universe. It was omnipresent, had no shape or boundaries. The elements mixed with each other, appearing and disappearing, as fluid as an elusive mist. But within this chaos, hidden in its very core, a new order was being born. In its center was a cosmic egg filled with the pure energy of yin and yang, light and darkness. There, in this enclosed space, slumbered the giant Pangu. He knew neither his fate nor even that the world around him did not yet exist. Time did not exist for him because time had not yet begun. Thousands upon thousands of years passed until Pangu awoke one day. The first thing he saw was darkness. It surrounded him, pressed down on him, filled every particle of his being. The world around him was cramped, enclosed, compressed into one. He tried to move, but the space did not give him freedom. Then he realized that he was able to change this world. He reached out and felt the edge of the shell. It was as hard as stone, but inside himself he felt rage and determination. He took an axe born from his very will and struck with a swing. A crack rang out, echoing through the void. The world around him vibrated. Cracks ran across the egg. With each new blow, its walls cracked more and more. Finally, the shell shattered and its pieces flew apart. Light, pure elements soared upwards. That's how the sky was born. Everything heavy, dense, and burdensome fell down, forming the earth. But when the shell disappeared, Pangu saw that the world was not yet ready. Everything was unstable, shaky, like a morning mist. The sky could barely hold itself up, threatening to fall again and merge with the earth, mixing everything into primordial chaos. Then he realized, if he didn't hold them, the world would disappear. He straightened to his full gigantic height, put his feet on the ground, and stubbornly propped up the sky with his hands so that it would not collapse. Every day he grew. With every moment he became taller and stronger, and with him grew the universe. Space formed between the earth and the sky, in which life could be born. He stood like that, holding the world on his shoulders. Everything that existed depended on him. His breath became the wind, his voice, thunder. His movements determined the passage of time. Day after day, night after night, he stood, watching the world strengthen and gain strength. When finally he felt that the sky would no longer fall, that the earth was solid enough, and that order was established, he closed his eyes and collapsed. His body could no longer hold the world, but he no longer needed to. The universe could exist without him. A strong wind swept through the world. His voice sounded for the last time in peals of thunder. When he fell, his body became part of what he created. His flesh turned into earth. His blood turned into great rivers. His hair became forests, and his bones formed mountain ranges. Even his sweat, falling in drops, gave life to the first rains. But what happened to his soul? They say it spread throughout the world, filling it with power. Some claim that the first gods arose from his last breath, who continued his work. Others believe that the first man appeared from his spirit, the one who was to populate this new land. Thus ended the journey of the giant who created the world. This myth teaches that everything great requires sacrifice. The world is not born without labor. Any creation requires effort. The great order of the world did not arise by itself. It was built, held, and protected. But Pangu only laid the foundation. Heaven and earth were separated, but they remained empty. The world was great, but there was no life in it. His story had not yet begun. When Pangu fell, his body became the world, but the universe was not yet complete. Mountains, rivers, forests, and clouds already existed, but their movement was chaotic. Water flowed aimlessly. The wind rushed across the plains, not knowing when to stop. There was a need for a law that would direct its flow, give it rhythm, and make it alive. Thus, Yin and Yang appeared. These were the forces that permeated the entire fabric of reality, binding all things together. Yang represented light, fire, the sun, and movement. It rose upwards, warmed, and brought strength and growth. Yin represented darkness, moisture, the moon, and peace. It flowed downwards, cooled, and gave rest. They were not enemies. They did not fight, but complemented each other. Where Yang ignited the flame, Yin brought water to keep it from getting out of control. Where Yang moved the wind, Yin turned it into rain, filling the rivers. Yang created thunder, and Yin, the silence that followed it. One could not exist without the other, because light is impossible without shadow, and movement is meaningless without rest. But the world was not divided into two halves. It was woven from the interweaving of these forces. If Yang were pure and perfect, it would burn all living things. If Yin became absolute, the world would freeze, plunging into eternal peace. In every ray of sunlight, there is a corner of shadow. In every night, there is a glimmer of light. Everything flows, changes, transforms into one another. This is how day and night, summer and winter, life and death arose. Everything that is born must disappear someday, but from the disappearance, something new will arise again. People living in this world did not just observe this law, they learned to follow it. They saw that if a river flows too violently, it will erode its banks, and if it stands still, it will turn into a swamp. They saw that a person who only works without rest will burn out, and one who lives in constant peace will wither away. They understood that rigidity and flexibility must be in balance, that the world moves not linearly, but cyclically. Therefore, Yin and Yang became the very essence of the universe. They were present in the rhythm of human life, in the changing of the seasons, in the breath of nature. They were a law that no one had issued, but to which all things were subject. Among those who appeared after the death of Pangu was Nüwa. It is said that she was born along with the first flows of Yin and Yang. When the world first found balance, her body was unusual. From above, she looked like a beautiful woman, but below the waist, she had a long serpentine tail covered in scales, flexible and smooth as the flow of rivers. She could move on land, glide on water, and rise to the clouds without feeling any obstacles. Nüwa was a creator goddess, but not a ruler. Unlike the Jade Emperor who ruled the heavens, she did not care about power. Her goal was different. She wanted to create those who would live in this world, feel it, know it, and fill it with meaning. She wandered the earth for a long time, studied the forests and mountains, looked into the sky, trying to understand what life should be like. She saw how clouds floated across the sky, how rivers found their way to the sea, how fire danced in the wind. All this was beautiful, but soulless. Everything followed its path without will or reason. And then she decided to create a being that could be part of the world, but at the same time could change it. She stopped on the bank of one of the great rivers, bent down, dipped her hand into the clay, soft and pliable, and began to sculpt. Her fingers moved confidently, with love and care, as if before her was something fragile and precious. She sculpted the first man, a small creature similar to herself, but with 2 legs instead of a tail, with thin hands capable of creating. She blew on him, and he came to life. At first he looked scared, but then he stood up, looked around, took a step, then another. He saw the sky, heard the sound of water, felt the warm air on his skin, and smiled. Nüwa felt joy. She realized that she had created something beautiful and wanted more of them. She sculpted one after another, and soon new people appeared next to the first one. They held each other's hands, laughed, and looked at the world with delight. Nüwa watched them, but realized that it would take too long to sculpt each one by hand. Otherwise, the creation of humanity would take forever. Then, she came up with a new way. She took a rope, dipped it in liquid clay, and began to wave it in the air. Drops of mud flew in all directions, falling to the ground, and each turned into a person. The world quickly filled with life. The voices of people sounded on the plains and hills, on the banks of rivers and at the foot of mountains. But soon she noticed that not all people are the same. Those she sculpted with her hands were strong and well designed. They became noble, aristocratic, and wise. And those who came from drops of clay were more rough and imperfect. They became simple people, artisans, peasants, and servants. This is how social inequality arose in the world. Noble people were born from the hands of the goddess, and ordinary people from random splashes. But Nüwa loved all her children. She made no distinction between them. She taught them to live in harmony. The strong had to rule, the wise had to teach, but everyone was important and was part of the world. However, her story did not end there. When the world was already filled with life, one day the sky split. The great pillars that held it up cracked, and dark storms began to fall on the earth. Fires engulfed the forests. Rivers overflowed their banks. Fiery stones fell from the heavens, destroying everything around. The people she created cried out in fear, hid, but there was no salvation anywhere. Then Nüwa realized if she did not fix this world, it would again plunge into chaos. She went to the great turtle, asked for its legs, and propped up the sky with them so that it would no longer fall. She collected multicolored stones, melted them, and used this celestial glue to patch the holes in the celestial vault. Having given all her strength, Nüwa felt that her time on this earth had come to an end. She knew that she would no longer be able to walk among people, watch the sunrises, and listen to the laughter of those she had created. But she no longer needed to fear for them. She saw how people rebuilt their homes, raised children, passed on knowledge, and created their future. The world she had saved and filled with life was now living its own life. It is said that, dying, Nüwa dissolved into the world she created. Her spirit remained in the stones and clay, in the wind and water, in the breath of every person. She did not disappear, but became part of all her children. Since then, the Chinese have believed that every person carries a particle of divine power, that everyone has a purpose to leave their mark. But the world continued to live on its own. Gods, born together with the universe, wandered among the mountains and rivers. There was neither a ruler, nor a court, nor a law among them. The world was ungoverned. Then came the one who was destined to take the throne among the celestials, the Jade Emperor. But unlike the gods who had existed from the beginning of time, his role was different. He came when the universe already existed and brought to it what it lacked: order. But the path to power was not easy. It is said that he was once immortal. He was one who strived for perfection, studied the art of governance, grasped the wisdom of heaven and earth, and sought harmony in every movement. Centuries passed. He became wiser and wiser, but did not age. His will, spirit, and mind strengthened until one day he crossed the line that separates man from the immortal. Then he rose above the mortal world and above the heavens themselves. He came to where there was no power, but where it was needed. And when turmoil began among the gods, when storms threatened to destroy the heavens, he turned out to be the one who could stop the chaos. He ascended to the throne of the heavenly palace thanks to his own righteousness and wisdom, and from that moment the world changed. Now every god had his place. Those who were responsible for the water received the rivers as their possession. Those who controlled the winds were no longer restless wanderers. Now they were summoned when they were needed. The gods of thunder, rain, sun, and moon knew when their hour would come. Even the underworlds ceased to exist in disarray. Now there the souls of the dead were judged not according to the whims of spirits, but according to strict laws. This is how eternal order was established. But the Jade Emperor was not a god who descends to people, not one who interferes in their destinies. He sat on the throne, surrounded by heavenly officials, watched the universe, issued decrees, and judged among the gods. Over the centuries of his reign, He has repeatedly faced those who dared to challenge him. Great spirits rose up against him, trying to overthrow him from the throne. Demons tried to break into the heavenly palace, but, despite uprisings and revolts, he remained on the throne. Dynasties of people replaced each other, rulers of mortal worlds appeared and disappeared, but in heaven, no one could take his place. However, not only gods were under his authority. Below, in the rivers, forests, and mountains, there were other forces, spirits that were not gods, but which could still influence the fates of mortals. And not all of them were kind. The Jade Emperor ruled the heavens, but even his power could not encompass everything at once. The universe was too vast, its laws too complex, and the events too numerous. He could not himself control the reins or watch over the fates of mortals. Like any emperor in the world of people, he needed officials, ministers, and judges who could conduct the affairs of the heavenly palace. This is how the divine bureaucracy arose, a structure of power that permeated all things, from the highest celestial halls to the world of mortals and even the depths of the underworld. Each god had his own position. Each official was responsible for his own area of the universe. If the rain fell too early or too late, if a ship got caught in a storm, and a person suddenly died out of the blue, this was not a matter of chance, but a decision of the heavenly palace. When a thunderstorm began in the world, it was not just a play of the elements. It was a decree issued from heaven, the execution of a decision made by the gods who controlled the elements. The thunderstorm was led by Wukong, the god of thunder. He was not a deity of mercy. His task was to punish. In his hands was a hammer with which he struck the drum, causing peals of thunder. It is said that he had a long list of criminals, and when he found those who had committed evil, he unleashed his wrath on them. The rain was controlled by Houyi, who decided when the river should dry up and when it should be full flowing. If the harvest died from drought, or if downpours fell on the fields, it meant that the divine department had made its choice. The wind was under the authority of Pangu, the god of air currents. If a storm arose at sea and trees broke under gusts of squally wind, it was his doing. The gods of the elements possessed great power, but even they were only part of a colossal system. After all, in addition to the elements, there were even more subtle matters, such as life and fate, and completely different officials dealt with them. Heaven decided not only when it would rain or thunder, it determined the fate of every mortal, what life path was destined for him, whether he would be rich or poor, happy or unhappy. The Department of Destiny, headed by Simon, the heavenly scribe, was responsible for this. He kept scrolls of life and death, writing in them the names of all who were born and died. When a child was born, his fate was already written. His successes and failures were already predetermined. Simon had assistants such as Sang, the 3 stars, the gods of happiness, longevity, and wealth. They could change a person's fate, but only if he deserved it with his actions. Others kept the book of rebirths, in which it was written what the next incarnation of the soul would be. But the most formidable was the department that monitored those who violate the laws of the universe. A posthumous trial was prepared for them, where souls were sent after death. And if punishment did not overtake a person in the world of the living, then it was sure to await him there. The Jade Emperor did not go into every case personally. He created a system, and it worked flawlessly. Everything happened not by chance, but according to pre-compiled scrolls. A person could live in the illusion of freedom, but his life was already inscribed in the heavenly archives, and what happened to him was only the execution of a long-made decision. The heavenly palace ruled the universe, but people rarely turned their eyes to the distant emperor. The great gods sat on their thrones, giving orders and recording destinies. But their will concerned the general order, not the life of every individual. People sought protectors, patrons, and those who heard their voices, who knew their concerns, and could help not in the abstract sense of the universe, but in specific earthly matters. Such beings were gods who were once mortals, whose valor and strength made them more than just people. They lived among mortals and knew what it meant to fight for the truth and achieve their goals. And they were asked for advice. They were put on a par with ancient forces because they were living figures capable of changing a person's destiny. The name Guandi was known to everyone who had ever heard stories of duty and indestructible strength of spirit. He was a general, a man whose glory walked ahead of him. When his life was cut short, the heavens could not let him go. People like him do not disappear and do not become nameless shadows in the flow of rebirths. He remained to continue being a shield for those who fight for justice. He became the god of war, where strength belongs to those who defend the truth. His image hung in the homes of judges, in the shops of merchants, and in the halls of military leaders. He was invoked in moments when more than just the ability to wield weapons was required, when it was necessary to stand to the end, even if all the power of the world was against you. But not everyone was a warrior. People sought not battles, but prosperity. They built markets, opened trading rows, and sought fortune in a world where labor did not always bring results, and wealth could come or disappear. There was a belief that luck is a force that can be attracted if you know how. Cai Shen was the one who could grant the favor of fate. He was not asked for wealth for the sake of greed. He was revered by those who knew that labor is the basis of everything, but even the most skilled master can remain without reward if the stars do not align at the right moment. His signs were hung in houses so that the coming year would be successful. His statues stood in shops, as even the most cunning merchants knew. Without his blessing, the deal could fall through. Asking him for help meant acknowledging that the world is driven not only by effort, but also by the favor of higher powers. They came to him with gifts, because only those who know how to share are worthy to receive more. But even wealth meant nothing if there was no order in the world. You can be brave or lucky, but if the land on which you live is mired in injustice, if evil remains unpunished and the truth can be bought, then there is no point in either strength or gold in such a world. Every city needed someone to protect it from defilement. This guardian was Chéng Huáng, the city's patron god. He could not be seen in the flesh, but his power was felt on every street. His spirit dwelled within the city walls. An unseen observer, he knew what transpired in every alley. He saw all that was hidden and ensured that crimes did not go unpunished. Those who hoped to cheat justice feared him more than earthly judges, because human law could be circumvented. But no one could escape Chéng Huáng's gaze. Those who evaded punishment met their end, never knowing how their secret was revealed. Officials and commoners alike bowed before him, seeking protection for their city. These gods were living forces with whom people felt a daily connection. They didn't demand blind worship, but respect for them was stronger than fear of distant celestial beings, because their will could alter a mortal's life here and now. But alongside those who protected and granted fortune existed other entities that dwelled in the shadows, in the silence of night, in the rustle behind you, and in careless words better left unsaid. These were beings that belonged neither to humans nor to gods. They were feared, bargained with, and propitiated. They were a constant reminder that death was not always the end. Life went on. A person might strive for prosperity or indulge in vices, but one day their path would end. The body would cool, the breath would cease, and it would seem as though everything was over forever. But if, for the living, death meant farewell, for the soul, it became the start of a new journey. When that moment arrived, no one greeted it with solace. Gates opened before it, beyond which lay the realm of Chéng Huáng. There was no sun, but above the boundless plains stretched an ashen sky, shrouded in a haze through which a deathly light barely pierced. There was no wind, but the silence was filled with whispers of other destinies, the voices of those who had already passed through judgment and now awaited their new birth. In the center of this realm stood a black palace, reached by stone bridges that trembled beneath one's feet. On either side of the road stood guide spirits, pale and featureless. Their slender figures cast no shadows. Their eyes were empty. They silently pointed the way, urging the soul forward toward the one who ruled this world. Beyond the palace's massive gates began the Hall of Judgment. Chéng Huáng's throne stood atop dozens of steps, massive as if carved from the very night, adorned with intricate patterns resembling tongues of fire. There, in the depths of darkness, sat Chéng Huáng, lord of the underworld. His face resembled a stone mask, unmoving, devoid of emotion. His eyes shone from within with a dim yellow light, like the reflection of a candle in an old bronze mirror. He did not utter unnecessary words, nor did he ask questions, for the answers were already before him. In his hands, he held the scroll of fates, unfurled, covered in endless lines in which every life, every thought, and every deed was recorded. But he himself did not decide the soul's fate. He was obeyed by 10 judges, each of whom ruled in their own palace, located in the depths of the underworld. The soul began its journey in the first hall, where its past was revealed without embellishment. A person might forget what they had done in life, might not reflect on their actions, might justify themselves to others. But here they saw everything, as if reliving every choice they had made. One judge looked at how pure the thoughts were. Another, what intentions lay behind the actions. A third saw how they had treated others, who had suffered because of them, and who had received help. A fourth assessed what pain they had brought into the world, even if they themselves were unaware of it. And there was no way to lie, to turn away, or to escape. With each new step, their life became clearer, like a pattern that was formed from disparate lines. Those whose lives were pure passed through these halls without delay. The judges said nothing, only watched them go, allowing them to move on. The road led the soul to the wheel of destiny, which spun in the center of Chéng Huáng's palace. It resembled a massive disc, carved from light stone, inscribed with ancient symbols whose lines glowed with a soft bluish light. Within it shimmered endless reflections. In its depths flowed rivers of time, rippled the faces of those who had once lived, and those who were yet to be born. The wheel moved silently, its rotation never stopping for an instant. It did not remember names, but it retained the essence of every soul, its karma. The wheel determined the next birth, whether the soul would become human, animal, or spirit, whether its life would be easy or full of misfortune. If the path had been darkened by evil, the new body became a prison, and life a heavy trial. The wheel led each one to where their own choices had led them, but not everyone reached this place. There were those whose lives had left behind too much destruction, and their path stopped among the underground halls. Their karma was too heavy, and they could not leave just like that. The judges sent them to atonement, where they had to go through the pain they themselves had created. A person who had destroyed the lives of others now saw their own crumble. One who had caused suffering now experienced it themselves. One who had known no pity now knew what it meant to stand before those to whom they had done evil. This was not punishment, but reflection, an opportunity to see their own path as it had been, but now through the eyes of others. When all was completed, the door opened again, and the wheel of destiny received the soul. Its light enveloped it, and in an instant, it vanished into a new world. A person might forget everything that had been before, but the karma remained with them. It influenced their future path, their meeting with the world, and the trials that awaited them ahead. Life could erase memory, but the universe forgot nothing. The world of the dead did not always release those who had left their bodies. There were souls that passed through judgment, accepted their fate, dissolved into the wheel of destiny, and moved on. But it also happened that the transition was interrupted. Something caused the soul to remain, to reach out to the world where it no longer belonged. This was how Guy, restless ghosts who could not find their way forward, appeared. Some remained harmless. They returned home, shrouding their loved ones with an invisible presence that could be felt in a cold draft, in the creaking of floorboards, in the slamming of a shuttered window, in a premonition that made the heart skip a beat. Some believed that the Guy were asking to be remembered, that they did not want to disappear without a trace, and if an offering was left for them at the door, they would leave in peace. Others said that souls that were forgotten began to get angry, that if no one remembered the deceased, they turned into a hungry shadow that no longer understood why it was here. But there were also those who did not want to say goodbye to life. They were held back by hatred, revenge, or anger. They did not seek understanding, nor did they expect to be noticed. They wanted those who had condemned them to death to suffer as they once had. They could be felt in misfortunes that came without reason, in disturbing dreams and reflections where something was wrong. Their victims fell ill, lost their luck, and went mad because they could not understand what was happening to them. People left fires in doorways so that the Guy could not enter, hung red amulets, burned incense. But if the spirit had already chosen its victim, it was difficult to get rid of it. Sometimes it meant that someone had to die. But even the most dangerous Guy were still human souls. They remembered who they had been, what they had lost, and what they had lacked to move on. They might be angry, but they understood pain. Mogwai, on the other hand, were even more dangerous. They belonged neither to the world of the living nor to the realm of the dead. They were not born and did not die. They simply were. They could not be seen unless they wanted to be noticed. Mogwai waited for a person to leave the door open for them. They did not try to scare a person, but acted more subtly. They whispered doubts, their voices merging with thoughts, and the person did not even realize that something had changed. They did not say kill or give orders. They only asked questions. What if you never achieve what you want? They're laughing behind your back. You can feel it, can't you? And the person began to think that these questions belonged to them. Sometimes Guy could be seen. At first, it was just a silhouette on the edge of vision, a blurry figure in a reflection, or a slight movement in the dark. Then they stood closer, appeared where they shouldn't be, spoke in the voices that a person wanted to hear. That's why people feared mirrors. During the day, they were ordinary objects, but at night, you could see something in them that did not belong to this world. It was said that mirrors should not be left uncovered at night. In the dark, they didn't just reflect, they invited. Sometimes you could notice something extra in them, such as a movement that wasn't in reality. It was said that if you stared into such a mirror for too long, it would start looking back. Superstitions weren't born just like that. You couldn't put 4 candles in a room. The number 4 sounded the same as the word death. In empty corridors, it was better not to turn around if you heard footsteps. If someone called you by name at night, you shouldn't answer right away. Nature obeyed its laws, but behind its order stood ancient forces that ruled the waters, rains, and winds. Their presence was felt in the roar of waterfalls, in the depths of lakes, in gusts of wind, and in the quiet whirlwinds that swept across the land like the breath of a huge creature. In Chinese tradition, the main embodiment of these forces was the dragon, guardian of balance and link between heaven and earth. Its image had accompanied emperors since ancient times. The dragon symbolized not brute force, but wisdom and understanding of the balance of power. Unlike predatory beasts, which showed their power through aggression, the dragon possessed secret knowledge that allowed it to control the elements, summon rain, or stop it. The very image of this creature symbolized the law sent down by the universe itself. But if one dragon could be the patron of rulers, others ruled over the elements of nature. The 4 dragon kings were guardians of the seas and rivers, lords of rains and tides. Their will determined life on earth because no people, no state could exist without water. The king of the eastern sea ruled the expanses of the ocean. His abode stood on the seabed among coral gardens, and his retinue consisted of spirits of waves and water snakes that directed tides and ebbs. He decided the fate of ships, unleashed storms, and could direct fish into nets or leave fishing boats without a catch. The king of the southern sea controlled rivers and rains. His will determined when it would rain, how full the rivers would be, what lands would receive harvest, and what would remain dry. When droughts threatened villages, priests turned to him, performing rituals at sacred springs. Temples of rain were built in his honor, in which prayers were accompanied by offerings of jade amulets and sacrificial water. The king of the western sea kept the sources of mountain rivers, from where water flowed into the valleys. His palace was among icy lakes, his breath turned into frost. He was responsible for purity and silence, and if he pleased, he opened secret knowledge hidden in the depths of snowy peaks. The king of the northern sea was the guardian of the depths. His waters remained cold, motionless, but they concealed ancient secrets. It was said that his chambers were in a place where the sun did not shine, and in his domains existed forces inaccessible even to the gods. If his anger raised the waters, flooding coastal lands, it was considered a sign that something more significant than simple earthly matters had been violated. Dragons did not forgive negligence. Ancient chronicles record cases where people tried to change the natural course of water. During the Tang dynasty, one of the officials ordered the course of the Great River to be changed to protect his lands from floods. As soon as the work began, clouds covered the sky. A storm broke out, and the waters rushed with such force that entire villages were flooded. The people saw this as revenge of the dragons, and the emperor had to issue a decree prohibiting interference with the course of rivers without special permission. But not only water had its guardians. Forests, mountains, and plains. Everything was inhabited by spirits whose influence was felt in every corner of China. Some were benevolent and helped those who understood their language. Others punished carelessness. But all of them were part of a single world in which man was only one of the inhabitants. Mountains were considered sacred places, closest to heaven, and therefore their peaks belonged to immortal spirits. They were powerful, but rarely interfered in the affairs of mortals. Some patronized monks and hermits, others guarded the entrance to secret worlds, and still others tested those who dared to invade their territory. One of the most famous spirits was Hebo, the deity of mountain streams. He lived on the peaks covered with eternal snow and controlled the waters that flowed down, filling the rivers. When people built temples on the slopes, they brought him offerings, leaving vessels of pure spring water. If the stream dried up or, conversely, turned into a storm, it was considered a sign that the spirit was dissatisfied with something. But among the mountain spirits there were also man-eaters, meeting with whom promised death. They lived in caves, among misty ravines, and deceived travelers, luring them with the sounds of flutes or cries for help. Legends said that they could take the form of a human, but their reflection in the water always remained beastly. The rivers of China have always been living beings. They could be generous, bringing fertility, or destructive, washing away entire settlements. Their spirits existed as real forces with which it was necessary to be able to negotiate. The great Houyi, the Yellow River, had many guardian spirits. The most revered was an old man in white clothes living in the depths of the river. He could appear to people, warning of floods or, conversely, promising a successful season for farmers. Legend said that he often tested people, offering them deals, and if a mortal showed greed or disrespect, the spirit could flood his village or make him a wanderer whom the river would never let home again. There were also ghost rivers, in whose waters the souls of the drowned were hidden. It was believed that at night in such places, you could hear them call travelers by name, hoping to entice them along. To protect themselves, stone altars were placed on the banks, and lanterns were lit so that the spirits could not come ashore. Among all the natural spirits, it was the trees that were considered the keepers of memory. They lived longer than people, watched the change of generations, and some of them could talk to those who knew how to listen to them. In Chinese villages, it was customary to respect old trees. Cutting down such a tree meant incurring the wrath of its spirit. Cypresses and pines were especially revered, which were considered symbols of longevity. They believed that if you hugged the trunk of such a tree and listened, you could hear the voices of ancestors who whispered advice to those who were ready to accept it. Peach trees had a special power. They grew in the gardens of the gods, and their fruits bestowed immortality. In homes, peach wood was considered an amulet. They believed that it warded off evil spirits. On holidays, the front doors were decorated with peach amulets, and if a disease appeared in the house, a piece of bark was burned to cleanse the space. There were also cursed groves in which birds never sang, and old trees whose gnarled roots resembled crooked fingers. It was said that they belonged to evil spirits that were better left undisturbed. In Chinese culture, man has never been the master of nature. He could live in harmony with it, could honor its power and seek its blessing. But if he forgot about balance and reverence, then nature reminded him of himself, with rains that did not stop for weeks, rivers that overflowed their banks, and roads that disappeared into the fog. He who understood these signs could live in harmony with the surrounding world. He who ignored them became part of another legend told at the campfire. But if nature followed its laws, then the world of people required order. It was created by the people themselves, passing traditions from generation to generation, preserving the connection between the living and the dead. This order was formed for centuries, but most of all, it was strengthened by Confucianism, a doctrine that became the basis of Chinese civilization. Confucius lived in an era when the country was torn apart into warring kingdoms. Rulers forgot about their duty, Wars wiped cities off the face of the earth, and old traditions lost their influence. He created a system of views that did not rely on divine commandments. He studied the texts of former sages, reviewed the rituals of the past, and looked for patterns in history through which states became strong and people became virtuous. He concluded that the stability of society rests on the correct relationships between people, where everyone should follow their role, where the younger honors the elder, and the ruler cares about the subjects. The Chinese world was arranged so that the family became the foundation of everything. Man was part of a clan, a link between past and future generations. Confucius said that if there is order in the family, then there will be order in the state. If a person respects his parents, cares for them, and honors their memory after death, then he will also respect the ruler and follow traditions. In every house, there was an altar of ancestors on which tablets with the names of deceased relatives were kept. They were brought offerings, tea, rice, and incense. It was believed that the dead continue to exist among their descendants, guiding them, protecting them, and watching their actions. If the family forgot their ancestors, it lost their blessing. Reverence for elders was no less important. The father was the head of the family. His word was law. The son had no right to argue with his father, even if he thought he was wrong. Obedience was not considered weakness. On the contrary, it was a sign of nobility. Even if the father was wrong, the son should respectfully remind him of his duty, but in no case contradict him openly. This principle was transferred to the whole society. The emperor was the father of the whole country. He had to rule fairly, care for the people, and be an example of morality. If he violated this order, if he ruled cruelly and unfairly, then he lost the mandate of heaven, the right given from above to rule the country. Then the people had the right to revolt, and his overthrow was not considered a rebellion, but a restoration of natural harmony. Each person had his own purpose. Confucius identified 5 main types of relationships that defined the structure of society: ruler and subject. The emperor must rule wisely, and the people must respect him. Father and son. Father cares for son, and son reveres father. Husband and wife. Husband leads the family, and wife obeys him, but he is obliged to protect and care for her. Elder brother and younger brother. Younger listens to elder, and elder cares for younger. And finally, friends. The only equal relations based on mutual respect. If a person knew his role and performed it correctly, the world was stable and harmonious. Confucius valued education and knowledge. In Chinese culture, the most respected person was a scientist. Confucius said that the country should be ruled not by inheritance, but only by those who have proven their wisdom. Therefore, a system of state examinations was introduced, which determined who was worthy of holding high office. Those wishing to become officials underwent the most difficult tests. For several days, they were locked in small rooms where they had to write treatises on morality, state structure, and history. Only the best received the right to serve the state. Even in the 19th century, when in many countries power was still passed down by inheritance, in China, the main rulers became those who could prove their wisdom. Confucianism penetrated into everyday life, manners of communication, and traditions. Every gesture, every word, even facial expression had meaning. When talking to an elder, you could not look him directly in the eyes. This was considered disrespect. When meeting with a high-ranking person, you had to make the correct bow. Disputes had to be conducted calmly and restrainedly. Showing anger or impatience was considered low and unworthy. Confucianism created a world in which power belonged to those who were wiser. It asserted a strict order where everyone took his place, where traditions were passed down unchanged from generation to generation. But alongside this teaching, there existed another philosophy that rejected rigid frameworks, did not establish strict rules, but taught to follow the natural flow of life. This was Taoism, a doctrine in which the chaos of the universe turned into harmony. Taoism emerged as the opposite of the strict system of Confucianism. It did not aim to create a correct state and did not give strict commandments. It taught to follow the natural flow of the world, to trust nature and not artificial laws. Taoism asserted that the universe is already in perfect harmony, and human intervention only disrupts this balance. The main principle was the concept of Wu Wei, or non-action, absence of action. This did not mean inaction in the usual sense, but said that you should not forcibly change the world and fight the inevitable. You should not try to control what is already moving correctly. Water, encountering an obstacle, simply flows around it. So a person who has learned the Tao should not persist where it is necessary to retreat, should not go head-on where you can find another way. If Confucianism saw harmony in hierarchy and fulfilling its role, then the Taoist saw it in the absence of structure, in the fluidity and smooth movement of things. The emperor rules the country? Let him rule. A smart person will not interfere in this, but will find a way to live so that power does not touch his life. The official dictates the rules. Let him dictate. True freedom is not in laws, but in not depending on them. Taoists went to the mountains, avoided palaces, and did not seek power because they knew all human achievements are an illusion. Empires collapse, laws change, but the stars continue their way across the sky, and the rivers continue to flow to the sea without asking who rules the world today. Unlike philosophers of the Confucian school who wrote treatises and strived for clarity, Taoist sages often spoke in riddles or were silent. They believed that the true Tao cannot be comprehended by the mind or expressed in words, because any explanation is already a distortion. One of the main texts of Taoism, Tao Te Ching, attributed to Lao Tzu, begins with the phrase, "The Tao that can be expressed in words is not the true Tao." Taoism not only denied the need for strict laws, but also offered a path that led beyond the very boundaries of human life. If Confucianism taught to be a worthy person, then Taoism asked the question, what if it is possible to transcend human nature? Taoists believed that the path of the Tao is not only the search for harmony, but also the path to immortality. They believed that if a person learns to live in accordance with natural laws, cleanses the body and mind from harmful influences, if he masters the secret knowledge of breathing, qi energy, and the balance of yin and yang, then he will be able to prolong his life or even achieve immortality. In search of this state, they developed alchemical methods, created potions of longevity, and searched for the elixir of immortality. They studied herbs and minerals, meditated, and practiced special physical exercises, believing that proper management of energy is able to transform the body and spirit. Some of the Taoists disappeared from the world, and legends were composed about them. It was said that they learned to turn into clouds, go to another reality, and dissolve in nature. Old chronicles record people who went to the mountains and never returned, about wanderers who were seen for decades, but who did not age. They were called immortals, beings who had comprehended the true nature of being. Taoism penetrated into everyday life, shaping Chinese medicine, martial arts, and the art of energy management, Qigong and Taiji Quan. He taught to live in harmony with the body, nature, and oneself. He said that health is a balance of energies, and disease is a sign of disruption of the flow of forces. That proper movement and breathing can return a person's lost integrity. Martial arts masters adopted from the Taoists the principles of softness and fluidity, the ability to yield in battle in order to win later. Unlike brute force, the philosophy of Taoism offered to use the opponent's movement against himself, avoid collisions, and not go head-on. If the Confucian sage was strict and committed to the rules, then the Taoist sage is more of a cheerful recluse, a wanderer. He laughs at human anxieties, floats along the river of life, not trying to change its course. He knows that everything is temporary, that everything passes, and that is why he is free. It was said that Taoist sages could turn into wind, walk on clouds, and disappear beyond reality. But even if these were only legends, their philosophy really gave a person inner freedom. They were not afraid of change, did not cling to the earthly, and did not obey other people's laws. They were interested not in the structure of society, but in the secrets of life itself and ways to prolong it, or even go beyond the boundaries of human existence. They believed that by understanding the Tao, one could become immortal. But what if immortality is not a goal, but just another illusion? What if a person has already lived many lives and will live as many more until he is freed from the endless cycle of rebirths? A new teaching came into Chinese philosophy, Buddhism, and it brought with it a completely different picture of the universe. Unlike Confucianism, which established a strict order on earth, and Taoism, which taught to dissolve in the flow of the universe, Buddhism looked deeper. Buddhism spoke about the very meaning of existence, about suffering, the causes of human troubles, and the path to liberation. He not only offered a philosophy, but also provided hope. If a person lives in suffering, and their world is full of pain and injustice, it's not an accident, but a result of their past actions. According to Buddhism, karma is the law of cause and effect, an invisible force linking the past, present, and future. Everything a person does leaves a trace and creates causes that will manifest in future lives. If they act well, their next life will be prosperous. If they do evil, suffering awaits them. No prayers or offerings to spirits can change this law. Only the individual is responsible for their own fate. Buddhism brought the concept of samsara to Chinese culture, the endless cycle of births and deaths. A person dies, but their soul does not disappear. It reappears in a new body, again and again, until they reach nirvana, or, in other words, complete liberation and enlightenment. But not everyone could immediately achieve this state. More often, people were tied to the world by their desires, passions, and ignorance. These passions pushed them into making mistakes, influencing their karma, and returning them to the world of suffering. Even after death, they faced the ordeal of the afterlife judgment. In Chinese Buddhism, concepts of the afterlife intertwined with traditional beliefs about the underworld of Yin Yang. Judges of the underworld examined the karma of the deceased, weighing their good and evil deeds. If a person had led a righteous life, they could be reborn in more favorable circumstances. But if their soul was burdened with sins, punishment awaited them in one of the underworlds, where they had to atone for their actions. But the punishment was only temporary, and when the sins were atoned for, the soul would return to the world, given a new chance. Buddhism not only explained suffering, but also provided examples of those who had overcome this world. The teachings included Buddhas, beings who had attained nirvana and freed themselves from rebirths. Buddha is not a name, but a state, the highest stage of development for a being who has realized the truth. The most famous was Siddhartha Gautama, a man who renounced power and wealth to understand the nature of suffering and find the path to liberation. Along with Buddhism, the veneration of bodhisattvas came to Chinese culture, beings who had achieved enlightenment but refused to enter nirvana in order to help others be free from suffering. The most revered became Guanyin, the bodhisattva of compassion, who hears the prayers of all living beings and helps those who seek salvation. Her image, gentle and compassionate, became one of the most beloved in the Chinese religious tradition. Buddhism did not reject other beliefs, but intertwined with them, enriching and changing them. It gave new depth and form to Chinese religiosity. It gave people hope that suffering is not a sentence, but a test that can be overcome. It taught that the world as we know it is only a temporary illusion, that everything changes and no one is bound to one existence forever. If Confucianism said that a person should take their place in the world and Taoism taught to go with the flow, then Buddhism offered to go beyond existence itself, to break free from the cycle of rebirths and reach a state in which there is no pain, no suffering, and no time itself. We have already examined how the world of Chinese beliefs was formed. We talked about gods and the strict hierarchy of the celestial palace, analyzed the philosophical teachings that determined not only religious ideas, but life itself. Now, let's turn to the heroes. Chinese mythology is full of legends about people who changed the world, tamed the elements, and defied the gods. Their exploits determined what China became and how it was seen by posterity. In ancient times, when the world was not yet inhabited by people, when rivers flowed where they wanted and mountains arose on their own, China suffered from the Great Flood. Water overflowed its banks, flooded villages, eroded fields, and washed away roads. The whole country turned into a huge sea, and no one could tame the elements. People died of hunger, animals left their lands, and rain poured as if the heavenly gates had opened forever. The first to try to cope with this disaster was Gun, the father of Yu. He built dams, created barriers, but the water was stronger. It broke down walls, found weak points, and destroyed everything that people built. For 10 years, Gun fought the river, but he could not defeat it. Then the emperor ordered him to be executed, and the taming of the flood was entrusted to his son, Yu. Yu did not repeat his father's mistakes. He understood that water cannot be restrained, it must be directed. Instead of building barriers, he began to dig canals, lay new channels for rivers, creating a natural drainage system. He traveled throughout China, studying the land, observing the rivers. He was looking for ways to subdue them, not with force, but with reason. Legends said that he worked for 13 years without rest, himself digging the earth and laying new channels. Even when he passed by his house and heard his wife's voice, he did not go inside. If he had stopped for even a moment, the flood could have swallowed the country. In the end, his efforts bore fruit. The rivers no longer overflowed. The water began to follow a new path, and China gained a new life. In gratitude for his feat, the people elected him emperor, and he founded the first great Chinese dynasty. The story of Yu became a symbol of human perseverance, knowledge, and harmony with nature. He conquered the elements with reason, showing that nature can not only be tamed, but also made an ally. Another legend tells us about 10 sons. They were the children of the great celestial Lord and alternately appeared in the sky to warm the earth. But one day, tired of boredom, all 10 sons rose at the same time. Their light and heat became unbearable. The rivers dried up, the earth cracked, plants and animals died from the heat. The world began to disappear in flames. The great celestial lord could not stop his sons and then called the greatest archer, Houyi. He gave him a magic bow and 10 arrows, ordering him to rid the world of danger. Houyi took aim and one by one began to shoot down the suns. 9 luminaries fell from the sky, and only one remained, so that the world would not plunge into darkness. People celebrated his victory, but the celestial gods were furious. Houyi, who had saved humanity, became a cursed hero. He lost divine favor, and his fate no longer belonged to heaven. Realizing that he was doomed to old age and death, he went in search of the elixir of immortality. He traveled for a long time until he found Xiwangmu, the mistress of the Western paradise. She gave him a potion that could take him to heaven, but he did not drink it immediately. He wanted to share it with his wife, Chang'e. One day, when he was not at home, Chang'e saw the elixir, and remembering that her husband had doomed her to death, or according to another version, fearing that the elixir would be stolen or out of curiosity, took it herself. Legend has it that she ascended to heaven, but not to the throne of the gods. Instead, she became a resident of the moon, forever alone and forever separated from the earth. Houyi lost everything. He saved the world, but could not save himself. His name became a legend, but he remained a mortal exile among people, as a warning that even a hero can become a victim of his decisions. The next myth tells us about 8 sages. They wandered around the world, laughed at its rules, drank wine with the gods, rose into the sky, and returned back when they wanted. They were called the 8 Immortals, 8 Taoist sages who knew the secret of eternal life. Each of them came to immortality in their own way. They did not care about the laws of people or gods. They knew that the world is a game, and they learned to play it better than anyone. Lu Dongbin was a warrior, a skilled fencer, and a man who was predicted to have a brilliant career in the court. He dreamed of glory and great battles, but one day he fell asleep in a tavern and had a dream. In this dream, he lived a whole life. He became an official, received wealth, started a family. Years passed, then he was betrayed, his career collapsed, his property was taken away, and he lost everything. He grew old in loneliness and died unnecessary to anyone. Waking up, he realized that it was all just an illusion. Worldly success is a mirage that disappears sooner or later. Then he left his old life, went on a journey, and met an immortal mentor who opened the path of Tao to him. Thus, Lu Dongbin learned immortality not in glory, but in renouncing it. Once, Li Tieguai was a great sage whose body was strong and whose face was beautiful. One day, he sent his soul on an astral journey, leaving his body for several days. But when he returned, his body had already been burned. The disciple thought he was dead. He found himself trapped between worlds. Then he entered the first body he came across, the body of a beggar, a lame old man with an iron cane. People laughed at him, looking at his ugly appearance, but he just laughed in response. After all, he was no longer human. He crossed the border between mortals and immortals, and earthly trifles no longer bothered him. He could turn stones into gold, but gave them only to the poor. He could perform miracles, but preferred to joke about the greedy and stupid. He walked the earth like a tramp, but eternity itself walked behind him. Han Shangzi was born into a noble family, but he was not interested in worldly learning. He saw the secrets of the world in music. He wandered through fields and mountains, listening to how the wind plays with the foliage, how the water sings in the streams, how the snow falls on the ground, making no sound. They said that he played the flute so that flowers bloomed in winter, and birds sat on his shoulder, enchanted by the melody. He understood the language of nature, and one day disappeared. dissolving in the music and becoming part of it. Zhang Guolao was a Taoist master known for riding his white donkey backward. He was asked why he did this, and he laughed and replied, "You think that time moves forward, but it moves backward. You think you know the way, but you are just following in the footsteps of others." His donkey could disappear into the air and reappear at his will. Zhang Guolao could predict the future, but never said it directly, only left riddles. He knew that all truths are relative, reality is an illusion, and the best way to know the world is to look at it differently than everyone else. He Xianggu was the only woman among the 8 immortals. She began her journey as a teenager when a Taoist teacher gave her a magic peach of immortality. After that, her body became light as a cloud, and she could live without needing food. She wandered through the mountains, collecting herbs and helping people, and one day simply rose into the sky, dissolving in the dawn. Lan Kaihe was the strangest of the immortals. He wore tattered clothes, walked barefoot, sang in the streets, and often pretended to be insane. He walked among people, but did not belong to them. They gave him money. He could immediately throw it into the river or give it to the poor. He could laugh, looking at the rich, knowing that their gold is just dust. He never explained his actions, but one day, in front of everyone, he sang a new song and ascended to heaven, disappearing into the clouds. Chao Guojiu was an aristocrat, the brother of the empress, who had everything. But one day he saw how dirty court life was, how much betrayal, greed, and hatred there was in it. He left the palace, put on simple clothes, and became a wanderer. He sought the truth until he met other immortals who showed him that wealth is an illusion, and true strength is in freedom from the earthly. Before this, we talked about myths that shaped the idea of the world and explained how the universe is arranged. But now, we move on to another story. This is not an ancient myth and not a legend rooted in the mists of time. This is a book, the great literary epic of China, based on Buddhist and Taoist ideas about the world, but created by the pen of a writer. The book is called Journey to the West. It was created in the 16th century by the writer Wu Chenggen. The book tells about the pilgrimage of the Buddhist monk Xuanzang to India for the sacred sutras. But as often happens, the main character in the story is not the one who walks the righteous path, but the one who creates chaos. And such a hero here is Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, a creature that repeatedly violated all the rules, almost destroying the journey itself. Journey to the West is a literary novel, but the image of the Monkey King absorbed the ancient Chinese ideas about the nature of a rebel, about the search for immortality, the struggle with the gods, and the punishment for pride. This is the story of a hero who received incredible power, but did not know what to do with it. He challenged the entire universe just to prove that he could. He appeared from a stone, saturated with the energy of heaven and earth, absorbing the magic of the world. As soon as he appeared, he realized that he was not like everyone else. He had strength, cunning, a thirst for knowledge, and an incredible desire not to obey anyone. He went on a journey, studied the art of fighting, and sought knowledge until he found a Taoist teacher who revealed the secret of immortality to him and taught him 72 transformations. He could change his appearance, becoming anyone, an animal, a spirit, and even an inanimate object. But immortality alone was not enough for him. He descended into the underwater kingdom of the Dragon King and took his main treasure, the golden staff Houyi Jingu Bang, which could change its size from a needle to a huge pillar capable of holding up the sky. This staff used to support the world's ocean, But now it became a weapon in the hands of a monkey. Now he possessed immortality, knew Taoist magic, could turn into any creature, and possessed the most powerful weapon in the world. His first thought was not about how to maintain balance, but about how to prove that he was above the gods. When he realized that no one could compare to him in strength, he decided that he should rule the heavens. He appeared in the palace of the Jade Emperor, the main god of the Chinese pantheon, and demanded that his power be recognized. The gods, wanting to avoid war, decided not to engage him in battle, but to trick him into heaven. The emperor offered him the title of groom, the one who takes care of the heavenly horses. Soon Wukong considered this an insult, destroyed the stable, broke into the celestial chambers, and declared himself the great sage, equal to heaven, a creature that should not be given titles, because he himself is above all titles. Then the war began. Heavenly generals, armies of gods, and legendary creatures. No one could cope with Sun Wukong. He defeated everyone, laughed at lightning strikes, deflected spears, and struck the heavenly hosts with his staff. He could not be killed or restrained. Then the Jade Emperor summoned the Buddha, the only being who could stop him. The Buddha did not use weapons and did not call for help from armies. He simply held out his hand and said, "You are great. But if you are so strong, try to get beyond my palm." Soon Wukong, sure that this was another trick, crossed the heavens in one jump. He flew through the clouds, past the stars and the far limits of the universe, until he reached 5 huge columns. He thought that this was the border of the world, left a sign of his presence, and, satisfied, returned back. But when he landed, he saw that he had been in the palm of the Buddha all this time. The 5 columns were just his fingers. At that very moment, the Buddha closed his palm and then turned it into a huge stone mountain of 5 peaks, under which the monkey was sealed for 500 years. His rebellion was suppressed, and power proved powerless against wisdom. But the story does not end there. Because one day, when the Buddha needed a protector for the monk Xuanzang, who was to go to India for the sacred sutras, the monkey was released. But now, he was not the same as before. He had to learn humility, patience, and awareness that strength is not just the ability to destroy, but also the duty to protect. Thus began his journey to the West, a path of redemption that was to turn a rebel into a true hero. The story of the Monkey King is an archetypal story about a rebel who challenges everything that exists, a story of someone who recognized no boundaries and was not afraid of the gods. But it is also a story about how even the greatest power means nothing without understanding one's own purpose. We have come a long way through the myths and legends of ancient China. These are not just stories about the past. This is a reflection of the Chinese view of the world, of man, of order and chaos, of life and death, and of the eternal search for harmony. They continue to live in culture, art, literature, books, and cinema. Thank you for being with me on this journey. I hope you found it interesting. Write your opinion in the comments and see you soon.